And we're live. Hello, folks. Hope you can all hear me okay. And thanks very much for joining me out there in YouTube land. If you're there, say hello. I'm Doc Sloan. Welcome to my science fiction station. We're in geosynchronous orbit over Northern Ireland. And we're here with our Dune book club, as irregular as ever. And I've got to get my glasses on because it's all a big blur. And excuse me, that's the doggies out the house there. So, we've hit this is it. I suppose this is the first part of the first chapter of book 3 of Dune, which is entitled The Prophet. So we're heading towards the end now, and I suppose within the natural divisions of the book, this is where we sort of plummet towards the climax, if you like. We have a couple of reasonably short chapters at the start here, and I said we're pretty much 10 chapters to go to the end of the book. It's been a bit of a journey so far, hasn't it? So there we go. We had quite an intense and epic chapter to wrap up book 2, which finished off with "You're the strong one, Chani. Stay with me," said Paul. "Always," said Chani, and she kissed his cheek. And that kind of romantic, very romantic end to the second part of the book. Not a cliffhanger of any kind, but we are going to get a bit of a time jump within the novel. So here we go. It's 11th of the 11th as well, isn't it? 22 seems like a weird day. But yeah, it has been a bit of an odd day. Running about as usual, getting things fitted here in the house and stuff, walking dogs and stuff, so on. So, as usual, let me just get myself sorted and organised, and we'll get cracking. And just a wee bit of housekeeping, I suppose, before we go any further, is I suppose we're not really planning to be around on the Fridays for much longer. Fridays are going to be occupied for us, so we're probably going to shift back to Thursdays. And I suppose we kind of intended to keep the book club on a Thursday for a wee while there. But yeah, just with life, etc., as usual, trying to find a regular night for this has been almost impossible. And I suppose we're still running with that, so this could be at any time over the next few weeks. We will be taking a wee bit of a break. Let me see. In a couple of weeks, at the start of December, we'll be away for a few days, hopefully, and then we'll be back. So it might not affect the program. It might. I'm only been away for a few days, so we'll have to see. But I'll let you know near the time. So yeah, hopefully then next week we'll move back to Thursday at 9 o'clock, all being well. Though I still have, as I said, the thing that's kind of slowed me up a wee bit this week. Excuse me, while I just adjust my chair. Is I've had a bit of kind of external from this reading to do. For a student, so I've just finished Cynthia Plath, The Bell Jar, which I thought was quite good, and it's not something I was kind of wanting to read at all, to be honest with you. and I thought it was very insightful, and I thought it was a very well written book. But I've got to tear through. I don't know if anybody's familiar with this, The Shock of the Fall, by Nathan Filer. I've got to get through this as well within a couple of days, so I've got a lot of heavy reading ahead. And a bit of heavy reading behind me. So there we go. So Dune is an absolute joy to come to between two such books. There's Matt S. saying, "Good afternoon, Doc." Good afternoon, Matt. How are you keeping? Thanks very much for joining us. So hopefully, as I said, we'll run back to Thursday next week, which means I've got to get my work done a day earlier, I suppose. But this one should run reasonably quickly tonight, I think. It's not a particularly massive chapter, and it's very dialogue heavy. Though there's quite a bit, it reveals quite a bit, I suppose, and it's going to link in nicely to the following chapter. But we get to see a bit of the Harkonnens, I suppose, and we only really do get fleeting glimpses of them. If you see it within the narrative, they're not there too often. And there's a wee comment in this chapter by the Baron, but this chapter in particular kind of reminds me of the interactions between the Baron and Peter de Vries. And of course, one of the really interesting minor characters. And I've always said that I felt that the Baron is diminished without Peter. I think there's an acknowledgement of that actually in this chapter from the Baron himself, and it's quite it's possibly one of the only sort of decent parts of his character, I suppose. Matt S says, "I'm doing well, Doc. How are you? Not too bad. Not too bad. Throat's still scratchy, but my throat's perpetually scratchy, Matt, because I do that much talking. But no, not too bad, I suppose. The weather's been incredibly windy, very very gusty here the last couple of days. Not going out with my hat, if you know that kind of wind. But otherwise, I'm not too bad. Yeah. So I have a few comments, by the way, from the previous episode, from a few of you. Just sorry, I haven't got a chance to answer them yet. I always answer any comments, so I'll probably have a wee tipper tap away tomorrow to get caught up with those. So apologies if we haven't got back to you in regards to those. There's Cynthia said, "Evening, Doc." Evening, Cynthia. How's it going? Thanks very much for joining us. I hope you're keeping well. It's good to see you. Yeah, so it's I suppose I don't know. It's been a bit of a funny week here, but the weather's taken a big shift, and it's very rainy. Just full on. I don't know, Irish rain type 47. But it's gotten really, really gusty to the point where it's been kind of, with we have a conservatory here at the back. I thought the roof was going to come off it the other day. So our weather's just heading into winter, but it's very, very gusty at the minute. And apart from that, I suppose I'm out walking the dogs and stuff, and I'm working away with my students. And I suppose I've been walking my dogs down, if we're thinking about it, I suppose down towards the river where I'm at here, where there's a big problem with the ash dieback fungal disease. And I was chatting to a chap down there about it, and once you notice it, you start looking around the trees and stuff, and it's absolutely pervasive all the way around the riverbanks. And walking my dogs up the countryside here, we were chatting a wee bit about it being mushroom season here as well. But I've been having a look at the trees up the road here from me, and there's quite a few ash there as well. They've all got the disease as well. It's one of those things, I suppose, within nature that I'm starting to pay a lot more attention to. I think the cause of it is I think it's a fungus, and I think it's been brought in by an imported tree that arrived in the country about 10 years ago. But it's really bad news for Ireland as a whole, north and south, because simply put, I think it's going to decimate about at least 80% of this tree population. And Northern Ireland, north and south, has been deforested really, really badly, and it continues to be. This process continues to happen, so it's really not good news for us. If you live in the right sort of areas, you start to notice that the winds coming down through the hills are coming off the coast more. And the bottom line is that there's no trees. A lot of the trees have been removed, and there's less protection. I think it's an interesting thing, especially in the light of looking at environmental science fiction, all this kind of thing. There's Matt saying hi, Cynthia saying hi, Matt. And what kind of tutor are you, Doc? Says Matt. What kinds of students do you mentor? Oh, okay. And Carlos Crescelius says, "Hey, Doc, evening, everyone." You've got another comment there, Matt, so I'll get to that one first. What kind of tutor am I? I'm a peripatetic, if you like. No, I'm a private tutor, and I'll teach anybody, pretty much, as long as they behave themselves. And I teach all sorts of ages, really, from primary kids up to adults, and I teach a range of subjects, I suppose, but within Northern Ireland, I'll teach things like the transfer tests, which are where kids transfer over to from primary school to secondary school, and we have a sort of grammar school admission system here, which is based on these tests. So I teach them, and then I teach English language, English literature, I teach mathematics, I teach history. I don't teach RE for a reason. And any of the ICT, computer-related subjects as well. I'll pretty much. I don't teach music, interestingly enough, because it's hard to get students to actually do. You need to practice and develop that kind of muscle memory thing, and it's if the students don't do it, it's not very I don't know, you don't progress very well. So I don't have the patience, I think, for teaching music. I much rather enjoy it. But apart from that, I teach all sorts really, and it's I approach things, I suppose, as a classicist, and because I'm a classicist, I'm a multidisciplinarian, so I've got my hand in pretty much every pot there is. So I'm private tuition available for most things, pretty much, if you see what I mean. Carlos says, and hey dog, evening everybody. It says Carlos. Matt S says the book Billionaire's Vinegar tells a fascinating story about how grape blight completely changed the taste of wines after the 1880s, so that the wines of history are inaccessible to us today due to the need for international grafting. That's really interesting. Yeah, I'm not. I think this was I think what's happened here, Matt, is I think somebody's deliberately brought this species over. Let me have a wee quick look at it. I mean, it's elsewhere, but it's pretty devastating. Ash dieback. There we go, and it's to do with I suppose in Northern Ireland. I don't know if it's throughout where else this is prevalent at the minute. Let me have a wee quick look. Woodland Trust there. Ash dieback kills around 80% of ash trees across the UK at a cost of billions. The effects will be that's money. Yeah, sorry, hang on a second. Hymenoscyphus fraxineus. There we go. That's what's causing it. Is a fungus which originated in Asia. It didn't cause much damage on its native hosts of the Manchurian ash and the Chinese ash in its native range. However, its introduction to Europe about 30 years ago has devastated the European ash. I'm assuming from that point it's made it to Britain, and I think 10 years ago, therefore, it got here. So, and I think it was a transplanted tree, but I'm not too sure where it was from, But it's everywhere, and it's big black spots, basically, if you like, on all the leaves, and it works down through the tree's sort of vascular system, if you like. That sounds interesting. I'm really, because I suppose the interesting thing about I'm interested in fungi. I'm no expert or anything, but as a life form, if you know what I mean. I don't think they're that well understood. Let's scribble that down, Matt. Let me have a wee glance at it. But I think there's several things like that. Grape blight, completely, yeah. Excuse me. Billionaire's Vinegar. I get that sounds like a good title for a book about that. Bit of imagination in there. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you very much. There's Bojack Harkness saying hello all. Hello, Bojack. We're just having a bit of a natter about my week, and I haven't really been doing too much, but we're just chatting about me being out walking with the dogs and looking at the ash dieback. And I was saying I'd seen it down by the river where I normally walk the dogs, but up in the countryside there, we walked the other day and noticed a fair amount of it. I suppose there's a bit of a range of trees up there, but there's an awful lot of ash down. I suppose this would be along the entire riverbank. I live off the River Bann in Northern Ireland, which is a river that runs the whole way down through the country, down into the major locks, upper and lower Loch Earn. It's a very long river, and a fair amount of it is forested, that way. So yeah, it's a little bit of an environmental disaster right on our doorstep, Matt says that Billionaire's Vinegar is about wine forging. It's sort of like a mystery history. Nail biter. Read it in 24 hours, and I hate wine. No, I can't stand white wine. And I used to drink the odd red wine, but I don't know. It's not my tastes, I think, too. But I like stories about wine. Stories about wine in the ancient world are really interesting, and vineyards as well. But oddly enough, stories about wine fascinate me, but particular myths about them. And there's a whole set of Dionysus, and in the Bible you get Naboth's vineyard, and then you have, I suppose, the story with Noah planting the vineyard after the flood. And I'm not too sure about this. I don't think it's in the Christian Old Testament, but is it the story about Satan takes these three. Satan enters the vineyard after Noah plants it. It said, and he kills 3 of the animals from the ark. Does anybody know this story? I don't know where. I wonder where I read this. And what he does basically is he kills 3 animals and takes their hearts and squeezes them on the vines. And if my understanding is correct, the first heart is let me see, the heart of a lion, I believe. The second is the heart of a pig, and the third is the heart of a wild beast, I think, as it's described. And the idea is that when somebody drinks a little bit of wine, pride like a lion. When they drink a bit more, they start acting like a pig. And if you drink enough, you'll behave like a wild beast. And and it's a great story. And I haven't read that. I don't know where I read it, to be honest with you. But I've known that story for a long, long time. It's a really good one. So just one of the wee examples of stories about wine. But the ones to do with Dionysus are all kind of, do you get it right or do you get it wrong? And if you get it right, drunken happiness ensues. If you see what I mean, if you get it wrong, madness and death. Carlos Crescelius is saying Texas Hill Country has a similar problem because of introduced cedar, which is out competing native trees and taking over. Yeah. And interestingly enough, I think we have a number of species that have arrived in Ireland now. And I saw a program not too long ago about the north coast here, and it was, I suppose, a group of we'll call them ecologists, if you like, but I'd have to stress the amateur nature of that term. And they were up attempting to kill and destroy animals and plants in an attempt to save the environment that's being taken over, if you see what I mean, the native species. And I'm not too sure that thinking is correct. And it's not always correct, not always incorrect, if you see what I mean. But in terms of what I thought, they were actually doing more harm. And I suppose things naturally move and progress. It's a question, as you say, when it's introduced. But things have a way of ending up all over the place anyway, if you see what I mean. There's some interesting questions, for example, about the cocaine mummies, if you know about that. And where did they get the cocaine from? Yeah, I think there's all sorts of things, and with changing climate, I suppose there's always a knock on as well. We've just had this is November, and we've had I was telling you about very gusty winds there, and then we've had a full-on sort of Irish rain type 47, and then prior to that we had 2 absolutely blistering gorgeous days, and it's November, and it's just almost unheard of. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's unheard of here. You should beware ecologists. An ecologist asked me to care for 2 friends of his recently. He wanted me to take them into my sietch. He has no water as it is. A boy and his mother out of class. Yes, indeed. Indeed, very good. We'll have to get cracking in a wee second, but what has it got me thinking of? Yeah, it's I'm because of doing these videos, I suppose, and having to do a wee bit of extra work around in life that's happened. I didn't quite get some of the videos done that I've been wanting to do over a wee while, so they've kind of backed up, and I've got some of them half written, and I suppose I'm going to try and take a day or two to get cracking at them. But I'd started a video on Carl Sagan's Cosmos, or started writing these, one on Carl Sagan's Cosmos, one on the culture, and I was to do one on the Demolished Man. So I had 3 that I'd pretty much planned to do. And I suppose the idea for me is, as I'm doing an extraneous reading from this, anytime I grab a science fiction book and read it, I want to do a video on it. Particularly, I'm trying to read certain things, I suppose, to present to the audience. So the other one, that I was thinking on was Ursula Le Guin's. Hang on. The word for world is forest. And if you are a Dune fan, I highly recommend this. If you love Dune, you're going to like this a lot. There's a lot of similarities. I'll read you the wee blurb on the back. Actually, when the inhabitants of a peaceful world are conquered by the bloodthirsty humans, they find themselves forced into servitude at the mercy of their brutal masters. Eventually, desperation causes them to abandon their strictures against violence and rebel against their captors. But in doing so, they have endangered the very foundations of their society. For every blow against the invaders is a blow to the humanity of the Athshans, and once the killing starts, there is no turning back. Ecological science fiction, very much on a par with Dune, messianic character, and it deals with male violence and aggression. And you could almost put this and Dune together and probably get I'm trying to think of a Avatar, that kind of thing. I think Avatar's borrows heavily from Dune. But it's a very short. What have we got? 128 pages novella, I think. And I'm going to do a video on this. It was one of the ones that I wanted to include in. But for anybody who is a Dune fan looking at a quick read, if you haven't read this, it should absolutely sit right on the shelf next to it, I think. Definitely the absolute, the very similar literature, I think. Excuse me. Did it come to you in a vision, Carlos? And that's how all ecologists come. I think I think the idea of being a good ecologist is being the fact that it is. I suppose it is kind of, well, some people say it's a new science, but I'd argue that one of the oldest books in the world is on ecology. Yeah, in fact, it is. I'd say that Hesiod's Works and Days. And if you understand the meaning of the word ecology, if you like, is the law or the word of your household. It's a good one. So I don't necessarily agree with some of the commentators that ecology is a brand new science, but I think it needs to be a multidisciplinary one. I think, Goodness gracious, 21 minutes of gabbing. We better get started. We book 3 of Dune, the Prophet. And interestingly enough, I suppose it's one of my favorite characters in the epigraph, Count Casimir Fenring again, and we've seen a bit of him in action recently. Very intriguing character. Let's have a wee look at the epigraph, and this is on the epigraph is entitled Count Fenring, a Profile by the Princess Irulan. No woman, no man, no child ever was deeply intimate with my father. The closest anyone ever came to casual camaraderie with the Padishah Emperor was the relationship offered by Count Casimir Fenring, a companion from childhood. The measure of Count Fenring's friendship may be seen first in a positive thing. He allayed the Landsraad's suspicions after the Arrakis affair. It cost more than 1 billion solaris in spice bribes, so my mother said, and there were other gifts as well: slave women, royal honours, and tokens of rank. The second major evidence of the Count's friendship was negative. He refused to kill a man, even though it was within his capabilities and my father commanded it. I will relate this presently. Excuse me. That's quite an interesting little epigraph, a study of the Count Fenring. And it's interesting in what we're presented. The measure of his friendship is a positive thing, which is bribing all of these people. And we would argue, isn't that a negative thing, I suppose? And of course, the negative thing, which is he refused to kill a man, even though it's within his capabilities, and my father commanded. I almost argue which is positive and which is negative. But I'd say, all this bribing and stuff, slave women, royal honors, tokens of rank, all of this, that sounds quite negative in relation to the Arrakis affair. Refusing to kill a man, that kind of sounds positive as we read this. And we don't really know too much about this. We get a sense of the first, but not the second. And of course, for those of us who know the story, it's a pretty important thing, isn't it? It's really crucial. And it actually makes Count Casimir Fenring, I'd argue, what happens at the end of Dune is the one character that you would be most intrigued by. I suppose Paul obviously is, wow, what's going on here? But the fact that he's this person who goes, no, if you see what I mean. and we'll have a wee chat about it when we get there. For anybody who's reading for the first time, we'll try not to spoil. But the count feathering is really interesting. That's just what I got. The positive negatives there are kind of should be inverted, shouldn't they? And I think, yeah, there's a little bit about, there's a possibility that might have something to do with what happens at the end of this chapter as well. So we begin with the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen in a rage, raging down corridors from his private apartments. Immediately, as I suppose I knew this already, but I just put, has there been an assassination attempt? He flits through patches that are in the late afternoon sunlight that's poured down from high windows. So we get this sort of sense of him piling down. And we're told that he bobbed and twisted in his suspensors with violent movements. Past the kitchen, past the library, past the small reception room, and into the servants' antechambers where evening relaxation has set in. So this large floating angry man is piling down and heading to a room of relative calm until he arrives. And this is, of course, Guard Captain Yakin Nefed's quarters, where he hangs about with his lackeys, if you like. We're told that he's squatted on a divan across the chamber, and his stupor of Samuta dullness is in his flat face. The eerie wailing of Samuta music around him, his own court near to do his bidding. So I suppose a bit of his own court, I think, is a nice way of putting it, isn't it? And we get so this peace and calm, this Samuta dullness. Of course, this is Nefed's drug, isn't it? And Nefed, the Baron, roared, and the effect, men scrambled. Nefed stood, his face composed by the narcotic, but with an overlay of paleness that told of his fear. The Samuta music had stopped. It's like one of those scenes where, you know, the gunfighter walks into the Wild West saloon and everything just comes to a halt. Nefed says, "My Lord Baron." And we're told that only the drug kept the trembling out of his voice. I suppose we get a fair. The last time we saw the Baron, we kind of get a sense of him not being. I got a sense of him not being quite right. We're getting a lot more of his internal process here, I think, and he seems to be back on form. We're told he scanned the faces around him, sees the looks of frantic quiet in them, returned his attention to Nefed, and he spoke in a silken tone. A bit of a change from his roar. How long have you been my guard captain, Nefed? Nefed swallows. Since Arrakis, my lord. Almost 2 years. So this is our time frame, I suppose, which is, we can run with 2 years. This is exactly when Nefed becomes the Baron's guard captain, isn't it? It's the time of the tooth, if you like. So we can say that this is a couple of years on now from the fall of Arrakeen. And have you always anticipated dangers to my person? And he's completely baiting and doing a lot of baiting here, I think. Such has been my only wish, my lord. Oh, hang on. Did I leave it? Bear with me a wee second. Such has been my only desire, my lord. I left a word out there. Let me just write that in. And then, of course, here we go. And another roar out of him. So he's messing with him here a fair bit, isn't he? Then where is Feyd-Rautha? And we have to equate that have you always anticipated dangers to my person? Where is Feyd-Rautha? Therefore, that's the same thing. Feyd-Rautha is a danger to his person. We're going to see that anyway. And I suppose the Baron knows it at this point. Nefed recoils, my lord. You do not consider Feyd-Rautha a danger to my person? We're told Nefed wet his lips with his tongue, and some of the Samuta dullness left his eyes. Feyd-Rautha is in the slave quarters, my lord. So there you go. According to Nefed, and Nefed does seem to know where he's at, so he does know, and of course he's wrong, or he could be there at this point, I suppose. With the women again, is the Baron's response, and we're told that he trembled with the effort of suppressing his anger. And it's interesting. We're going to discuss this at the end of the chapter here as well, with the Baron's punishment of Feyd. But this bit here, I think, is a good indicator. And I suppose we've talked about pretty much most of the Baron's natures on the page here. But I suppose it's one of the questions we've been asking about lately. We'll have a wee chat about whether the Baron is a misogynist as well. But with the woman again, trembled with the effort of suppressing his anger. He's going from anger, rage, silken voice, composure to, there. And so this is the thing that brings out, more anger in him. Sire, it could be he's cut off. Silence. So he advanced another step into the antechamber, noting how the men moved back, clearing a subtle space around Nephew, disassociating themselves from the object of wrath. And the Baron's quite good in this chapter, I think. Did I not command you to know precisely where the Nay Baron was at all times? Moved a step closer. Did I not say to you that you were to know precisely what the Nay Baron was saying at all times, and to whom? Another step. Did I not say to you to tell me whenever he went into the quarters of the slave women? Which when Nephew swallowed, perspiration stood out on his forehead, and the Baron held his voice flat, almost devoid of emphasis. I suppose that's kind of the point I was trying to make about the anger with the women here. Previously, with the women, again, I trembled with the effort of suppressing the anger. He's in control a lot here. And, makes his voice silken, makes it roars like a lion, brings it to a flat tone. Suggests an awful lot of control. So it's, as I said, just in terms of when we get to the very end of the chapter, the comment about the women and their fate, I suppose, it's something we can question about the Baron's character. So Nephew swallowed, and perspiration stood out on his forehead, and the Baron held his voice flat, almost devoid of emphasis. Did I not say these things to you? Nephew nodded. The Baron, and I did not say to you that you were to check all slave boys sent to me, that you were to do this yourself, personally. Again, Nephew nodded. Did you perchance not see the blemish on the thigh of the one sent me this evening? Is it possible you... And of course, he's cut off here. We have an interruption. It's Uncle, and it's Feyd-Rautha. A surprise visit. That's, I suppose, not expected. And of course, that tells us that Feyd is not in the women's slave quarters. He's right here. And I suppose, of course, we have to wonder, how much has he been eavesdropping? Or has he just dandered in, knowing that his uncle is headed down here? So, just backtracking, what we're seeing is an attempt on the Baron's life here. It's been dealt with. It's just happened. And he's running through the details, checking to see, I think he's really wanting to see here if Nephew's involved. So to check all slave boys sent to me to do this yourself, personally. And again, Nephew is nodded. Did you perchance not see the blemish on the thigh on the one sent me this evening? Is it? And of course, that's where he's been cut off. So something to do with this blemish on the thigh of one of the slave boys sent to the Baron. That's got something to do with it. But we're cut off before, and of course, Feyd-Rautha comes in. The Baron whirled, we're told, and stared at Feyd-Rautha standing in the doorway. The presence of his nephew here now. The look of hurry that the young man couldn't conceive. So he's bombed it down here to, Uncle, because his attempt has failed, I suppose, as we'll find out. It all revealed much, we're told. Feyd-Rautha had his own spy system focused on the Baron. Here's I've got a few skulls in this episode, I suppose, that represent dead, as we know, whenever some character dies. So our first one is for the slave boy, but we don't quite find out how the Baron kills him. But we have quite a few people murdered in this chapter on the Baron's orders, but this is one where he's defended himself from an assassination attempt. You have to wonder actually how much is the slave boy involved in this. It's simply that something is placed on him, and whether he knows it's there or not, or is he an actual active assassin, if you see what I mean, a bit the same way the Atreides slave gladiator is. So the Baron, there is a body in my chambers that I wish removed. Very just straight to business. Kept his hand at the projectile weapon, we're told, beneath his robes, thankful that his shield was the best. So there's an absolute, I don't know, it would be quite ridiculous. It's very much these two people are trying to, well, one of them is trying to kill the other, while the other is doing his best not to kill the other, if you see if you see what I mean. And they've kind of become, the Baron and Feyd are almost kind of the book's new odd couple, if you see what I mean. And I think we'll get a wee comment about it, but it's something similar to what we have with the Baron and Peter, but it's just not the same. And I think, as I said, we'll see a wee comment about it in a bit. But so there's a body in my chambers I wish removed. He's got some sort of, he's a projectile weapon under his shield. He's absolutely prepared for threat here. Feyd, we're told, glanced at two guardsmen against the right wall, nodded, and these two guards detach themselves, scurry out of the door, down the hall towards the Baron's apartments. And this, of course, here we get the Baron's thoughts here, and it tells him something straight away. Those two, this young monster has much to yet learn about conspiracy. So these two guys, we'll find out later, are pretty much doomed. The Baron says, I presume you left matters peacefully in the slave quarters, Feyd. And he's very, very deceptive with his language here. And I love this, actually. I think the Baron's villainy here is superb. And very much what makes him a great villain, I think, is a lot of it's in this chapter. So Feyd-Rautha replies, well, I've been playing Cheops with the slave master. Feyd's thoughts here are, what's gone wrong? The boy we sent to my uncle has obviously been killed, but he was perfect for the job. Even Hawat couldn't have made a better choice. I've made a wee note here that Hawat has no role here, just based on that sentence. The boy was perfect. And I don't know if you remember the previous, let me see. Oh, it's the bit about, oh goodness, where are we going back to? I'm thinking on the epigraph again about life in the Emperor's house. Bear with me a wee second. I'm wondering, is that all the way back to, is that chapter 29? We had a wee chat about, oddly enough, that's why I remember, I think it's chapter 29. It is. We had a wee chat about this, about the slave concubine, is it, in question, in the royal family. Is it the girl that was chosen for the emperor? One of the slave concubines permitted my father under the Bene Gesserit agreement could not, of course, bear a royal successor. Oh, bear with me. Sorry, that's not the bit I'm looking for. Oh, here was a new slave concubine then, red-haired like my father, willowy and graceful. We were, not described, but it's quite possible that that's the Lady Margot Fenring. She had a dancer's muscles, and her training obviously had included neuro enticement. My father looked at her for a long time as she postured unclothed before him, and finally he said, she is too beautiful. We will save her as a gift. The idea that too beautiful, it's almost the same here as the boy was perfect, if you see what I mean. If the Baron had a bit more sense, if the boy was perfect, if you see what I mean, it's kind of similar to the gift. That's kind of where my thinking was anyway. To the Emperor, too beautiful. too good to be true. You know what I mean? Give it to someone else. I'll keep her as a gift. And gives her to Fenring. If that is the Lady Margot. I thought that was something similar here. That if the boy was perfect according to Feyd's thoughts, either he doesn't know his uncle the way he thinks he does, or else then that should have been a warning to the Baron. But well, the Baron has survived this anyway, hasn't he? So, been playing Cheops with the Slave Master. Cheops is Feints pyramid chess, and it is the is the Greek name for the Egyptian pharaoh Khufu, by the way, who's the same as the pharaoh Harem that the God Emperor calls upon here. But this game is called Cheops. And if you want to know what that word is, where it's from. So the Baron says, playing pyramid chess, how nice. Did you win? And he is dancing about here to distract Feyd, isn't he? Yes, uncle. And he strove to contain his disquiet. I just put for Feyd here. So Baron snaps his fingers. Nephew, you wish to be restored to my good graces? Nephew quavered, his voice quavered. Sire, what have I done? Of course, what has he done is that Feyd's not where he was supposed to be, and he didn't know, so he's messed up here. But I think the result of that, I think, is that the Baron knows that Nephid's still his man. If you see what I mean, the Baron says that's unimportant now. Feyd has beaten the slave master at Cheops. Did you hear that? Yes, sire. I wish you to take 3 men and go to the slave master, garrote the slave master, bring his body to me when you've finished, that I may see it was done properly. We cannot have such inept chess players in our employ. Feyd-Rautha says, but uncle, later, Feyd, we have to have later. And it's very, very just casual, isn't it? I've my next little skull on the book, I've just put it in here, is the slave master, reason for death, bad at chess. Dear oh dear, I thought that was quite funny. So the Baron's really just messing with him quite badly here, isn't he? He's being dancing around a bit, coming up with quite a, you're playing chess. Did you win? Yes. Kill this guy for not being good enough at chess. And that's goodbye to the slave master. And he said, later Feyd, and the 2 guards, were told, who'd been to the Baron's quarters that were dispatched by Feyd for the slave boy's body, staggered past the antechamber door with their load sagging between them, arms trailing. And the Baron watched, we're told, until they were out of sight. And it's quite grim, bit grotesque, real, and the Baron, I think it's a sense of theatre here. He's drawing out the moment. He's definitely in a way having fun with this, I think, or certainly he's messing badly with everyone here, Nephid as well. So Nephid steps up, we're told, beside the Baron. You wish me to kill the slave master now, my lord? Now. And when you've finished, add those 2 who just passed to your list. I don't like the way they carried that body. One should do such things neatly. I'll wish to see their carcasses too. And Nephid says, my lord, is it anything that and Feyd-Rautha says, do as your master ordered. Jumping in there. My next little skulls, I've got 2. There we go. For the guards. The reason of death, not carrying a corpse neatly enough. His villainy is it's great, isn't it? Here he's a proper villain. On the level of Bond villains dispensing with henchmen here. He'll take it a wee bit further, I think, but it's the level of whimsy, the reasoning, and of course he's got a real reason, to be quite angry, and it's just, I think that he could just have them all killed really without too much. Just kill that guy. There's a sense of theatre, a sense of drama here. And of course, he's going to want to play Feyd a bit here if the Baron's wishes are to be accomplished, which ultimately he has goals for Feyd-Rautha here, and the Baron is, I suppose, would like to survive into his retirement. suppose the Baron's thoughts are about his house as well, aren't they? We were talking about, in the previous chapter, Jessica's, I suppose, overall thoughts for House Atreides, the Reverend Mother Ramallo for the tribe. The Baron's is for House Harkonnen as well. Carlos says the attitude towards murder and assassination in the royal houses was quite casual. Yeah, I can't decide if it's more or less civilized than our current society. That's a very good point, Carlos. So this is likely the slave master that Feyd installed after his birthday duel, so the Baron likely knows that he's one of Feyd's spies, so the chess game is an excuse to diminish Feyd's resources. Yeah, that's correct. I mean, the previous slave master is dead, so that it's all set up so that Feyd can have his man put in place. This is this guy, unless he's changed them since, but it's definitely one of his men. And if he's the master of the slaves, I suppose, then he's also responsible for the slave boy that's been sent to the Baron. I suppose that could be Nephid's crime as well, by the way, that he didn't personally check the slave boy. Because that's the bit that the Baron sort of emphasizes, isn't it? And we don't really get a response from him. Did I, if we back up a bit, I suppose with Nephid, did I not say to you that you were to check all slave boys sent to me? That's because they probably come from the slave master. Do this yourself personally. And I get Nephid nodded. So the question is, did he do that? But he missed the dot. Did you? We don't get to find out because of Feyd interrupting, you see. But I think the Baron's happy enough with that Nephid's not involved. Otherwise, Nephid would be dead pretty quick, I think, here. Somebody else would be carrying out the executions. Yeah, most likely that's him, I think, yeah. And absolutely, yeah, I mean, this is basically wiping out. And if you think about it, whenever we arrive here, let me see. This servant's antechamber where the evening relaxation is set, and I suppose this is where Nephid is holding court here. Feyd doesn't arrive with these two guards. These two guards are in this room, so I would suggest that Feyd's got people in with Nephid as well. By the looks of it, there's a range of possibilities as to why the Baron's maybe annoyed with Nephid, but doesn't kill him. I think he thinks he's blameless here. And I think Nephid's definitely the Baron's man. Let me see. So yes, bad at chess, not carrying corpses neatly. It's a bit, as Carlos, you say, the attitude towards murder, quite casual. It's kind of fun. There is a level of fun to it. It's kind of funny. That he, I suppose, wonders at the Baron coming up with a justification for having these people murdered, and they're the most silly, whimsical things, aren't they? I don't like the way they carry. It's it's a bit reminiscent of Caligula, isn't it? That kind of thing. But again, the Baron doesn't kill for fun. He does so when he needs to. I think, isn't that the point? Especially when we talk about him and Piter earlier, you know. Where do we get to? Sorry. Oh yes, I wish to see their carcasses. So this is the two guards that Feyd. Is it anything that I've says Nephid? Do as your master ordered. Feyd-Rautha interrupts, and we get some of his thoughts here, and we do get a fair amount of back and forth, I suppose, with these two characters here. And it is almost like an odd couple that they are reading. You know, in many ways, they're on each other's. They're reading each other's minds correctly in a way. Pardon me, or their thoughts. You know. All I can so basically, Feyd's in a really bad place here. He's made as an attempt. It looks like it's going to it could well come back towards him. And all I can hope for now is to save my own skin. It's not worked. The Baron's thoughts here are good. He yet knows how to cut his losses. Yeah, go kill my men, basically. And they can't, of course, speak after that. The lad knows too what will please me and be most apt to stay my wrath from falling on it. He knows I must preserve him. Who, and here we go, I suppose here's the Baron's problem, really, isn't it? Who else do I have who could take the reins? I must leave someday. I have no other as capable. But he must learn, and I must preserve myself while he's learning. So there's nobody else. And I think that's pretty, I suppose, of the Harkonnen bloodline, if you like. And obviously the Baron's not got any sons of his own. Must preserve myself while he's learning. I suppose the other way to think about it is if the Baron sort of, I'm not going to go on forever, you get the sense that melange is an anti-agapic, if you like. It's a drug that slows and halts the aging process, but there must be limits to it. I suppose otherwise you could all just keep taking melange and live for a long, long time. So it is about passing on House Harkonnen to a worthy successor. It's what's important to him. But he's not there yet, and I have to preserve him, but I've got to preserve myself. An active preservation is what we're talking about. I must preserve him. I must preserve myself while he's learning. And I think then the Baron will hopefully be out of the way as an advisor, and I think that's the way it goes. Carl says, I'm not sure if it qualifies as whimsical, but my drunk aunt once punched me for breathing too loud. I wouldn't say it's a bit much for breathing too loud. Put that down to alcohol, probably. Goodness gracious. That's I'm sure you didn't find that funny, Carlos. Oh, I have to tell you guys a story one day, but we'll keep not for the Dune book club, but I'll tell you about a woman. What happened to somebody who slapped me in the face twice, for something I didn't do. Very, very hard, by the way, as well. Slapped me really hard, and I can tell you that's a story of whimsy, Carlos, and you'll enjoy it. But it's a bit lengthy and it's a bit crazy, and it made the news once upon a time. I'll tell you that much, but I'll let you know. I'll keep it for one of these days when I get a Sci-Fi Friday or a Sci-Fi Saturday. I don't know. I'm not a fan of violence, as you know, of any kind, pretty much. So Nephid signals men to assist him, and they led them out the door, and that's exit Nephid, basically stage left even. So the Baron turns and says, "Would you accompany me to my chambers, Feyd?" Feyd says, "I am yours to command." I'm thinking, I'm caught. I'm done here. And he's returning to the scene of the crime. He's being taken there, I suppose. After you, the Baron says, gestures to the door. I love this, that the threat of the Baron is pretty much imminent for Feyd here. And as we're told that, he only indicated his fear by only the barest of hesitations. His thoughts are, have I failed utterly? Will he slip a poison blade into my back slowly through the shield? Does he have an alternative successor? So that his two major problems. Will he just kill me? Tells you that Feyd is wearing a shield. And of course we know the Baron's wearing one as well. Slip a poison blade into my back slowly through the shield. But the Baron's thoughts here are quite right. Let him experience this moment of terror as he walked along behind his nephew. He will succeed me, but at a time of my choosing. I'll not have him throwing away what I've built. And he really is going for the full thing in this, isn't he? I think the Baron's real ambitions are, and again, they're not for him, really. For his house. So Feyd-Rautha, we're told tried not to walk too quickly. He felt the skin crawling on his back as though his body itself wondered when the blow would come. His muscles alternated between tension and relaxation. I think there's a lot of that in this chapter. It's a good motif for it. There's tension, relaxation. Am I going to get killed? Oh, there's a lot of that here, but a lot of tension. Have you heard the latest word from Arrakis? Asked the Baron. Feyd replies, "No, uncle." We're told he forced himself not to look back, turned down the hall out of the servants' wing. So we have this now as, I suppose, an Arrakis update, I think, from the Baron. This is the prophet of Dune that we're being told about. Of course, this is book 3, first part of book 3, the prophet. They've a new prophet or religious leader of some kind among the Fremen. They call him Muad'Dib. Very funny, really. It means the mouse. I've told Raban to let them have their religion. It'll keep them occupied. That's very interesting, uncle, says Feyd, and turned down the private corridor towards the Baron's quarters, wondering, why does he talk about religion? Is it some subtle hint to me? And of course the Baron goes, yes, isn't it? It's very interesting, uncle. Yes, isn't it? And it is interesting, I suppose, that the Baron is so dismissive of it, I think. At this point, the religions is certainly interesting, but let them have the religion, it'll keep them occupied. I think is remarkably naive of the Baron. And I suppose as a villain, he does have, he's a very real villain in many ways, I think. That's the thing about the Baron, no pun intended. He is well fleshed out as a villain. And he's a flawed villain in some ways. Of course, they usually are, if you know what I mean. But there's a flaw in his cleverness, but it's still, I don't know how to put it, doesn't diminish his cleverness, if you like. But I think that's just let them have the religion, it'll keep them occupied. A prophet has turned up, some religious leader amongst the Fremen. I would be worried about that because they've called him the mouse, But maybe all that subterfuge here. Why is it? What is it that Feyd doesn't know? I suppose. But the Baron says, "Yes, isn't it? It is interesting." So we arrive at the Baron's apartments and we go through the reception salon to the bedchamber, and we're told that there's subtle signs of a struggle. Subtle signs of a struggle greeted them, and there's a suspensor lamp displaced, a bed cushion on the floor, the soother reel spilled open across a bedstand. And the Baron says it was a clever plan. And he kept his body shield to maximum, stopped facing his nephew, but not clever enough. Tell me, Feyd, why didn't you strike me down yourself? You've had opportunity itself. So he's been very open here. Previously, with all of this other, he's been hiding away and sort of. He's where he's been hiding his motivations, if you like, for killing these everybody around him. Pretty much here, he's straight and direct here with Feyd. It was a clever plan, but not clever enough. Tell me why you didn't strike me yourself. You've had opportunity, why didn't you do this? So Feyd tries to kind of be, I suppose, a bit nonchalant here. We're told he found a suspensor chair and accomplished a mental shrug. So I kind of did a physical shrug there, a mental shrug, as he sat down without being asked. And his thoughts are, I must be bold now. You taught me that my own hands must remain clean. So, clever plan, why didn't you strike me yourself? It's not an absolute direct accusation of why did you try to kill me, but it's as good as. And the response here is they're feints, if you like. They're still playing with each other. You taught me that my own hands must remain clean. That's not an admission that I have anything to do with this, if you see what I mean. And the Baron replies, yes, when you face the Emperor, you must be able to say truthfully that you did not do the deed. The witch at the Emperor's elbow will hear your words, and know their truth or falsehood. Yes, I warned you about that. And it's a good question, and I put down a change of subject here, and we'll get that from the Baron anyway. Feyd says, why haven't you ever... Now, this is a very good question. Why haven't you ever bought a Bene Gesserit, Uncle, with a truth-sayer at your side? And there is, again, what happens here. He's cut off, and the Baron snapped at him. You know my tastes. The Feyd-Rautha studied his uncle and said, still one would be valuable, and he's cut off. I trust them not. And this is a snarl. And stop trying to change the subject. So if we back up again, I suppose the question arises in this chapter about the Baron's hatred for women. Is this real? Is he a real misogynist? Where the Baron loses his temper, where he gets really angry with the women again, trembled with the effort of suppressing it. That's the first time. The mention of the slave women's quarters, if you like. So he's been pretty much in control here. He's got Feyd exactly pretty much where he wants him. And I suppose they're engaging in a way that the Baron would want. Pardon me. Feyd asks an absolutely brilliant question. Why don't we have one, basically? Why haven't you ever bought a Bene Gesserit? Obviously, a female truth-sayer. He says, you know my tastes. And he snapped. And it's a question of buying one to be a truth-sayer. It's got nothing to do with sex, has it? And it's an interesting deflection from the Baron. It's got an exclamation mark on it. You know my tastes. And he snapped. Followed by, I trust them not, and snarled and stopped trying to change the subject. So he shut that down. It's a really, as Feyd says, still one would be valuable. It's not like a duke looking for a wife, if you see what I mean. The Emperor has a truth-sayer, and he's not in a... I have to assume that Gaius Hel Mohiam is not a bound concubine to the Emperor. She's his truth-sayer. So they kind of don't equate here. I don't know what you guys think about this. I think it's a wee bit odd. I genuinely didn't really go looking for it. It's just got this time... So looking at Frank's writing rather than analysing anything else, and I got a real sense of where the Baron loses it here. Again, we'll wrap it up with his last actions, pretty much with what ends at the chapter. But I thought it was another example of the Baron's misogyny coming through. If and as I said, I'm still open to this, I think, but it looks like he really is. Just where he kind of his demeanor changes, snarling, snapping here. And as I said, we don't get this question answered at all. Wouldn't a truth-sayer be really handy for the Baron to have anytime anybody did business with him? The Emperor's got one, but we have to assume it's certainly something that you could probably hire. Under contract. You have to wonder how the appointment for truth-sayer goes with the Emperor and the Bene Gesserit. And do the Bene Gesserit essentially sell their acolytes, if you like? I don't know. It's interesting. Carlos says, I wonder how exactly the Bene Gesserit actually coerced the Baron to get his genes for their breeding program. I believe that, Carlos, that's been answered in one of the Dune prequels. Cynthia says, Doc, I have to leave early tonight. We'll be back next week. Thanks. No problem, Cynthia. Thank you very much for joining us. Take it easy. It is dealt with in one of the prequels. I've read it. So it's I suppose, I actually thought it was quite an interesting story. But I don't know which of the prequels it's in. I only read of the Brian Herbert, Kevin J. Anderson books, I only read House Atreides, House Carino, and House Harkonnen. I couldn't even tell you which one came first. And I read the Hunters of Dune, Sandworms of Dune, which was the conclusion to the Dune series that they did. Excuse me. But I know it's in one of those books, and it's therefore Jessica's mother in those books is Gaius Hel Mohiam, and it's her that's sent to procure a specimen. If you to procure, so it's the Baron rapes her, I believe, in the books. We've talked about this a wee bit, Carlos, because there's a kind of an inconsistency that we read earlier. That it was at that point in the Brian Herbert, if I'm remembering correctly, Kevin J. Anderson books, and I couldn't tell you which one it is. I think at that point, because of the Gaius Hel Mohiam inflicts the Baron with every disease kind of known to man and causes his enormous fatness, etc. It's all a revenge thing, and she doesn't really care as long as she doesn't care how she gets the seed, if you see what I mean. So I think they pretty much it's a quite a bizarre thing, but I suppose the one thing that it did make sense was that Gaius Hel Mohiam is a logical fit for Jessica's mother. But yeah, so that's the bit that we read previously was to do with Margot Fenring, wasn't it? I think on Hasamir Fenring, it was something about a suggestion that Feyd, they hoped Feyd didn't have their uncle's tendency to go to fat. So that was a suggestion that the Baron Harkonnen's weight is of his own doing, if you see what I mean. So it's one of those things that I thought didn't kind of line up with canon, if you see what I mean. And that's all I've read. So I'm wondering if somebody could, anybody who's, it's been a long time since I read them as well, so I might be right. I'm pretty sure that's what happens. I kind of thought the story made sense, if you see what I mean. But yeah, it's to do, I suppose, with the Bene Gesserit not really wanting to get genetic material in any way that they consider unnatural, if you see what I mean. There's Vela saying, stopping in for a bit, always nice to catch you. Thank you very much, Vela. Thanks for joining us. It's yeah, we're piling through. It's one of those little things. But I suppose that's the thing I'm kind of pointing out here is just the Baron's behavior whenever women, the Bene Gesserit, turn up here, and then of course his ultimate actions at the end of the chapter, you know, and there's a suggestion of hatred of women, and I trust him not. He's to stop, cut. So another change of subject here, you know. Feyd, now his term mildly, as you wish, uncle. The Baron says, I remember a time in the arena several years ago. It seemed there that day a slave had been set to kill you. Is that truly how it was? So, as much as he says it's several years ago, we now know it's 2. Just under 2 years ago, possibly. It's been so long, uncle. After all, and he's cut off again. No evasions, please. There was a tightness of his voice exposed the rain of his anger. So we know the Baron is angry, as I said, I think in this chapter. It's just that it seems to flare a little bit. Feyd looked at his uncle. He knows, else he wouldn't ask. So it was a sham, uncle. I arranged it to discredit your slave master. And I like that, the fact that I suppose if we think about it, it was a sham, uncle, is a truth. I arranged it to discredit your slave master. Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Very clever. Brave too. It's not a full truth though, is it, if you see what I mean? But it's not an admission of did you do this? Very clever, brave too. That slave gladiator almost took you, didn't he? Yes, said Feyd. If you had finesse and subtlety to match such courage, you'd be truly formidable. So this is what the Baron thinks Feyd is lacking in. 2 key things, finesse and subtlety. He's not subtle as our Feyd, basically, especially his nod to his men there. gets them killed. Oh, this is the wee bit I've written at the top of the page here. Thoughts of Peter de Vries. And dear, I think it's very funny. As I said, I think it's a pity that Peter gets killed in Dune. If you could, I think if just as a mental exercise, if you could go back in time and tell Frank Herbert not to do something, it would be keep Peter around till the end. If you could, I think it's just the pair of them together are hilarious. I think, but we get a little bit of it's the Baron's thoughts of Peter, and I think it's possibly his only endearing quality. I think in this. But what he says to Feyd, if you had finesse and subtlety to match such courage, you'd be truly formidable. Shook his head from side to side. This is the Baron, as he'd done many times since that terrible day on Arrakis. It's an interesting way of describing it, isn't it, from the Baron's point of view? Surely it was his triumphant victory. But it's a terrible day, a day of terror on Arrakis. Maybe it works, I suppose. But we're told that he found himself regretting the loss of Peter the Mentat. I'm just wondering, is Frank regretting it at this point too? Just such a fun, dangerous, mad, and outrageously insane and evil character. And worse than the Baron, if you see it. The Baron's the rational one of the two. And this Mentat, wouldn't that make a good sitcom, wouldn't it? The Baron and Peter. A kind of odd couple. Alright, sorry, excuse me a wee second when I go looking for something, but not to worry. Well, aha, there we go, in my pocket. I get some fluids here, folks. Oh, and I hit something by accident there we go. There we are. Oh. Yeah, I really enjoy this chapter. I think it does remind me of the chapter with it'll be all three of them, I suppose, Baron, Peter, and Feyd, but particularly those interactions. And it's kind of found himself regretting the loss of Peter the Mentat. There'd been a man of delicate, devilish subtlety. Hadn't saved him though, and he shook his head. Fate was something inscrutable. Fate, that's an interesting thing. I think somebody was asking a question the other week about, Paul's prescience. Was it based, determinism and things like this? Here's the Baron talking about fate. Something inscrutable. But it's just nice that I think it's one of this little thought process here that the Baron has is again one of those things that really fleshes him out as a good villain, as a good character. You don't see Bond villains lamenting the loss of their really good henchmen, this kind of thing, if you see what I mean. And it's he regrets the loss of Peter. A man of delicate, devilish subtlety. I suppose the qualities that Feyd doesn't have yet. So Feyd glanced around the bedchamber, studying the signs of the struggle, wonders how his uncle overcame the slave they'd prepared so carefully. I've got they'd underlined here. Who is they? Who's the? And I'm having to assume it must be his slave master. Of course, again, this is one of these things where we see the Baron and Feyd's thoughts kind of pinging off each other. They're kind of on the, Feyd's thinking. Usually, one thinks it, the other says it. If you see what I mean. How did I beat him? Now, Feyd, let me keep some weapons to preserve in my old age. It's better we use this time to strike a bargain. So I think we've talked about this. This is the Baron giving Feyd a way out here. And otherwise, he's going to have to kill him, isn't he? It's as simple as that. And Feyd needs it's about both of them getting what they want ultimately. And I suppose it's an interesting way of looking at it. Feyd stared at him. His thoughts are a bargain. Aha. He means to keep me as his heir for certain. Sorry, I'll read that again. That was awful. A bargain. He means to keep me as his heir for certain then. Else, why bargain? One bargains with equals or near equals. I've just written no next to that. That's not true. What bargain, uncle? And he felt proud his voice remained calm and reasonable, betraying none of the elation that filled him. So he's I think at this point he's very happy to be alive. And of course there's an opportunity for him to mess this up here, I think. But yeah, it's almost the Baron's almost, I suppose, it's almost, is he worth keeping? Let's find out, I suppose. But it's, from Baron's point of view, there is no other worthy successor. So I need this guy trained more. He needs more knowledge. He needs more wisdom. He needs more patience. He needs more subtlety. He needs to be lot more subtle in his statecraft, if you like, if he's going to rule House Harkonnen, and possibly more. Your good material, Feyd. I don't waste good material. You persist, however, in refusing to learn my true value to you. You're obstinate. You do not see why I should be preserved as someone of the utmost value to you. This, and he gestured at the evidence of the struggle in the bedchamber, this was foolishness. I do not reward foolishness. And at the point, I think this is interesting, it shows Feyd's immaturity. I would be paying real attention here and not pushing it at all if I was him. But in his own mind, my thoughts would be careful. In his own mind, it's get to the point, you old fool. And I suppose I think it's interesting. We got a lot of mentions of the word fool in this chapter. We can see the Baron as a fool, especially when we talk about our archetypes of our Jungian archetypes of the collective unconscious. I think almost every character in this chapter is a fool, but pretty much the Baron, it can be, there's Feyd looking at him as an old fool. The Baron looking at Feyd as a fool, obstinate fool. Youth, the stupidity of youth. Nephew's pretty foolish, I think, as well. Excuse me. And of course, the bargain, making a pact, if you like. The Baron appreciates Piter's delicate, devilish subtlety. So yes, indeed, be careful about striking a bargain like this. So of course, get to the point, you old fool, is what's in Feyd's thoughts. And here's the Baron reading him. You think of me as an old fool. It's almost uncanny, this. And I put, of course, from our point of view, we get a bit of dramatic irony, we get a bit of humor from this, and it goes on a fair bit actually in this chapter. So get to the point, you old fool. You think of me as an old fool. I must dissuade you of that. You speak of a bargain. The impatience of youth, says the Baron. Well, this is the substance of it then. You will cease these foolish attempts on my life, and I, when you're ready for it, will step aside in your favor. So abdication is what we're talking about here. I will retire to an advisory position, leaving you in the seat of power. Retire, uncle? And here we go. You still think me the fool, and this but confirms it. Each of them thinks the other's a fool. You think I'm begging you. Step cautiously, Feyd. This old fool saw through the shielded needle that you'd planted in that slave boy's thigh. So now we know what the little blemish was on the slave boy's thigh. Right where I'd put my hand on it. The hand. The smallest pressure, and snick, a poison needle in the old fool's palm. Feyd. Very interesting. The hand again, isn't it? Into the palm, a shielded needle on a blemish, exactly where the Baron would normally put his hand. That's how well that Feyd has gotten to know the Baron's habits, but the Baron has told him. And it's also actually, backing up, it's also probably one of the questions I was asking about was the Baron's is it real misogyny here with the Baron, but where he shouts, "You know my tastes." He snapped, and is that's more to do with possibly the needle than the fact yeah. So that Feyd has gotten to know his uncle's sexual tastes really well. Hence that this, and if we, of course, it's a clever plan as we back up. We've been told, if we backtrack to thinking about this plan, as Feyd said, the boy we sent to my uncle, has obviously been killed, but he was perfect for the job. Even Hawat couldn't have made a better choice. The boy was perfect for everything he knew about his uncle. And again, I suppose we wouldn't have this chapter, would we, in Denis Villeneuve's Dune? It's not going to happen, probably. Simply put, this is the Baron being his, I suppose, homosexual, paedophilic best, and murderous best as well. And it's his own tastes, his own pleasures, the thing that's too good to be true, if you like, that are aimed at him. And of course, the interesting thing about this is, goodness, if we go all the way back, it matches what all the way back to here. Tell you what, it's one of our very early chapters, isn't it? It's Peiter and the Baron. Let me see. It's to do with why Peiter won't get Jessica, and why the Baron won't take Paul as prizes. They're too dangerous. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, potentially more dangerous than the father because of the mother's training. The lad has. Here we go. This is way back in chapter 2. Let me just check. Goodness, we're going back a bit. Back 2 notebooks. I have to grab different books. In chapter 2, yeah. The lad has such a sweet young body, potentially more dangerous than the father because of his mother's training. A cursed woman. Paul may be too dangerous to keep. And it's the same thing as Jessica is too dangerous for Peiter to keep as well. So the Baron's own warnings, if you know what I mean, they should apply here. I think that's, again, him not being himself too much. Or pardon me, not being at his best. It's the loss of Peiter. So this is it. Basically, Feyd will stop attempting to kill the Baron. And when he's ready, I will abdicate. I will step aside and you will take over the position, and the Baron will take up a role of an advisor, basically, to the head of House Harkonnen at this point. Because we're going to see how this plan develops. And of course, everything about we get the details of this attempted murder. Feyd. Baron's thoughts here we get. He shook his head. It could have worked too if Hawat hadn't warned me. I've written, aha. Hawat is playing both sides. Often my thoughts on this catch up to what's going on in the book, actually. It would have worked too if Hawat hadn't warned me. Well, let the lad believe I saw the plot on my own. That was my bad handwriting, excuse me. In a way, I did. And I put question mark, did he? I was the one who saved Hawat from the wreckage of Arrakis. Wreckage of Arrakis there. Again, not my triumphant victory. Terrible day on Arrakis we had previously, and now this wreckage of Arrakis. And this lad needs greater respect for my prowess. Again, we get Feyd's thoughts here. Remaining silent, struggling with himself. Is he being truthful? Does he really mean to retire? Why not? I'm sure to succeed in one day if I move carefully. He can't live forever. Perhaps it was foolish to try hurrying the process. Feyd says again there, you speak of a bargain. What pledge do we give to bind it? Now, just interesting. I actually thought abdication, if you like. That's what the Baron's offering here. And I suppose, yeah, we've had I suppose we've always had this thing within the UK with the Queen abdicate in favour of her very elderly son, Prince Charles, who's now King Charles III, or King Charles III, as they say, as they say in Ireland. So abdication, we've seen an abdication of a pope in recent times, haven't we? This is essentially what he's offering here, and it means that I suppose Feyd doesn't have to wait for the Baron to die to become the Baron himself, So it's not that bad. I think it's in a universe of longevity where people have melange that can extend your life. That, I suppose, may inspire people to rush things a bit, if if you see what I mean. So you speak of a bargain. What pledge do we give to bind it? I've titled this wee bit of the page. This is Thufir Hawat rides again. So the Baron says, well, how can we trust each other, eh? Well, Feyd, as for you, I'm setting Thufir Hawat to watch over you. I trust Hawat's mentat capabilities in this. Do you understand me? And as for me, you'll have to take me on faith. But I can't live forever, can I, Feyd? And perhaps you should begin to suspect now that there are things I know which you should know. So there we go. How can we trust each other? I'm setting Thufir Hawat's security, as we've been joking about since the beginning of this book, is a force to be reckoned with. I trust Hawat's mentat capabilities in this, and that I don't know. There's something almost paradoxical about the Baron in this chapter. We've heard him talk about fate and faith here. I trust Hawat's mentat capabilities when he fully understands that the original part of the original plan was to mess with Hawat's mentat capabilities, that he understands the flaws, I suppose, of a mentat. But I trust Hawat. His capabilities in this. So yeah, I trust him to function as a mentat, to keep an eye on you. Of course, Hawat looks like he's been playing both sides. And Feyd says, well, I give you my pledge, and what do you give me? So Feyd's saying, I promise not to kill you. What do you do for me? And of course the Baron says, and this is a lovely little Baron threat here. It's threat and the exercise of power, if you like. I let you go on living. And Feyd, he studies the Baron again. So he says, it's pretty much, I don't have you killed now, I think, is the way. I let you go on living, is, otherwise, if, I have to assume that if Feyd wasn't willing to go forward here, that the Baron would just have him killed. Time to groom someone else. He sets Hawat over me. What would he say if I told him Hawat planned the trick with the gladiator that cost him his slave master? He'd likely say I was lying in the attempt to discredit Hawat. The good Thufir is a mentat and has anticipated this moment. So very interestingly, as far as Feyd's concerned, the Baron, you don't know everything, do you? But oh dear, hang on, Thufir's anticipated this. He knows that I can't actually say too much here. And of course the Baron says, well, what do you say? Feyd's, what can I say? I accept, of course. But his thoughts here, Hawat, he plays both ends against the middle. Is that it? And I've just written, yes. He's moved to my uncle's camp because I didn't counsel him over the slave boy attempt. Sorry, has he moved to my uncle's camp because I didn't counsel him over the slave boy attempt? That suggests a rather naive, a level of naivety on Feyd's point of view. I think that Hawat obviously belongs to his uncle. In this point, he's in my camp. Has he moved to my uncle's camp as opposed to being in his camp? And of course, I've written underneath this a wee question. Again, he moved to my uncle's camp because I didn't counsel with him over the slave boy attempt. So we know that Hawat, from this statement, from this, the Feyd's thoughts here, is not involved. So the question is, who did he counsel? Probably, again, we'll have to run with the slave master. Baron says, you haven't said anything about my setting Hawat to watch you. And Feyd's thoughts here, he betrayed his anger by a flaring of nostrils. The name of Hawat. I think now, we often point out where I don't think the writing is particularly good, and I often like to say that I don't think it's very often in Dune, but I think this little bit is one example. Betrayed anger by a flaring of nostrils, the name of Hawat. Let me just read it, actually, word for word, rather than do it in injustice with my notes. Let's see. Feyd-Rautha betrayed anger by a flaring of nostrils. Love that. The name of Hawat had been a danger signal in the Harkonnen family for so many years, and now it had a new meaning. Still dangerous. And I found that funny and kind of stupid. That I thought that was and I don't know. I've written laughing out loud. I just thought it was that bit of writing could have been. If he'd put in something else after new meaning, other than reusing the word dangerous, or so how it had been a dangerous signal. So something really dangerous to the Harkonnen family. Now it had a new meaning. Still dangerous. That's just, I don't know about you. I just thought that was a bit, I don't know. It made me laugh out loud. And I get it, but I think it could be written a little bit better. Or either that, or it's an indication of Feyd's mind, if you like. Oh dear. Hawat's a dangerous toy, is what he says out loud after thinking this. And the Baron says, toy? Don't be stupid. So I'm hoping that the still dangerous bit is maybe Frank deliberately writing Feyd as stupid, because it's still dangerous. It just made me laugh, as I said. But sorry, toy, don't be stupid. I know what I have in Hawat and how to control it. Hawat has deep emotions, Feyd. The man without emotions is the one to fear. But deep emotions, now, these can be bent to your needs. Feyd says, Uncle, I don't understand you. Baron, yes, that's plain enough. And we get only a flicker of the eyelids betrayed the passage of resentment through Feyd-Rautha. So it's lots of little subtleties. They're really doing their best at control. And you do not understand Hawat. And of course, Feyd's thoughts are almost explosive here. Nor do you. And it's at that point, it's almost like a teenager and their father, this kind of thing. So the Baron here, who does Hawat blame for his present circumstances? Me, certainly. But he was an Atreides tool and bested me for years until the Imperium took a hand. That's a wee bit of, I suppose, funny as well, because you can call someone a tool. He was an Atreides tool, but in the proper sense of what a tool is, I suppose, rather than the pejorative. And he bested. It's interesting that the Barons are happy to admit this. And again, it gives an indication of the, I suppose, the cleverness of his character. That he's not just a kill, he's not a psychopath. He was an Atreides tool and bested me for years until the Imperium took a hand. That's how he sees it. His hate for me is a casual thing now. He believes he can best me anytime. Believing this, he is bested. For I direct his attention where I want it, against the Imperium. It is a tense. Tension is a good word to use about this chapter. Here we get this nice wee bit about Feyd saying, tensions of new understanding drew tight lines across Feyd-Rautha's forehead, thinned his mouth against the Emperor. And the Baron's thoughts, and this is about the throne, really, isn't it? We're getting to see a bit of the real ambition of House Harkonnen. Let my dear nephew try the taste of that. Let him say to himself, the Emperor Feyd-Rautha Harkonnen. Let him ask himself how much that's worth. Surely it must be worth the life of one old uncle who could make that dream come to pass. We're told Feyd slowly wet his, overemphasis there, slowly wet his lips with his tongue. Could it be true what the old fool was saying? There was more here than there seemed to be. Excuse me. And Feyd replies, Feyd says, and what has Hawat to do with this? Baron says he thinks he uses us to wreak his revenge upon the Emperor. I quite like that. It's a good phrase, isn't it? To wreak his revenge. What's that from? Is that from Blackadder or something? Now it's time to wreak my revenge. He thinks he uses us to wreak his revenge upon the Emperor. And when that's accomplished, Baron says he does not think about revenge. Again, I've put another question mark here. Clearly he does. Again, something paradoxical. There is something really paradoxical about the Baron in this chapter. That's the word I have to go with, I think. He's getting things wrong. Again, I'm wondering, is it because he's angry? In fact, well, they're both getting things wrong, I suppose. It's that kind of sense that they both seem to almost live in a bubble in terms of their interactions with Hawat up until now, I suppose. So it's pretty much from what the Baron is saying, you don't understand Hawat to Feyd's thoughts, neither do you. And the question, I suppose the point is, we're not too sure what Hawat's up to at this point. And maybe he's out to bring down House Harkonnen via his incompetence. I don't know, I was starting to think about how whenever we talk up to the point where before Arakin falls, all the mistakes that he keeps making, how bad his security is. He strikes me almost as a bit of a disaster causing individual at this point. Of course, there's more to Hawat, I think, which is good. And we'll see it in the next chapter. Pardon me. It's the thing we do, don't we? Yeah, we do. He thinks he uses us to wreak his revenge upon the Emperor, is what the Baron says. And when that's accomplished, the Baron then says this: he does not think about revenge. How is that not paradoxical? It just doesn't make any sense. Of course he does. You've just said that he did. You've just said he thinks he uses us to wreak his revenge upon the Emperor. Following that, he does not think about revenge. And I know the context of it here shifts how it's a man who must serve others and doesn't even know this about himself. But who's to say he's not still serving his dead lord, if you see what I mean? That's kind of where I was going with that. But yeah, very much, yeah. Some of the Baron's thinking isn't quite right here. Feyd says, I have learned much from Hawat. Agreed, and he agreed that felt the truth of his words. It's a true thing. I have learned much from this guy. But the more I learn, the more I feel we should dispose of him, and soon. And that kind of echoes the Baron's thoughts about Piter. Regardless of missing Piter, I think in this chapter, he regretted, isn't it, the way it's put, regretted the loss of Piter the Mentat. He was going to have to kill him real soon. The Baron had come to this conclusion here that Feyd has come to about Piter, which I think is very interesting. And again, a lot of this mirrors some aspects of that chapter. All the fools this time, though. Baron says, you don't like the idea of his watching. Sorry, you don't like the idea of his watching you. And Feyd replies, Hawat watches everybody. The Baron, and he may put you on a throne. Hawat is subtle. What he misses about Piter, by the way. He is dangerous, devious, all of the... And you have to go to this point, are those the qualities of all Mentats? We have to remember that Paul is a Mentat, but we've just heard Piter. The Baron misses Piter because of his subtlety, his dangerous, his deviousness. This is the same way that Hawat is described. They're Mentat master of assassins, aren't they? He may put you on a throne. Hawat is subtle. He is dangerous, devious. But I'll not yet withhold the antidote from him. I quite like this wee bit here. A sword is dangerous too, Feyd. We have a scabbard for this one, though. The poison's in him. When we withdraw the antidote, death will sheath him. So this sword metaphor of excuse me. Hang on, there we go. My belt's digging under me there. He may put you on a throne. So this is the throne that House Harkonnen is going to go for. There only is pretty much one. It's the Imperium. Hawat is subtle. He's dangerous, devious. Not yet withhold the antidote from him. That's how I'll kill him. Because you can just shoot him or stab him at any time if he wants. A sword is dangerous too, Feyd. We have a scabbard for this one. The poison's in him. When we withdraw the antidote, death will sheath him. So we've got something to put in this sword in if we need to. And whenever we withdraw the antidote, that's when we'll put him in. This man is a sword. That's the metaphor here. Hawat is a sword, and he's very dangerous, but we have a scabbard, something to keep him in. And when we withdraw the antidote, death will sheath him. We'll put this sword away. That's what I always like to say. My wee poem, Swords, if anybody hasn't checked it out on the channel. The brightest sword stays in its scabbard, doesn't it? So, yeah, you can see, by the way, if you want to check out what's up ahead, here come the skulls at the very end of the chapter. And maybe we'll get somebody's opinion on this if you want to wade in there. Is the Baron a misogynist here? So, Feyd-Rautha, we get a little bit more of the politicking here and really just a bit of, well, what that can end up, the result of all of this, all of these machinations in this chapter. So, Feyd says, in a way, it's like the arena. Feints within feints within feints. You watch to see which way the gladiator leans, which way he looks, how he holds his knife. Nodded to himself, seeing that his words pleased his uncle, but thinking, yes, like the arena, and the cutting edge is the mind. It was quite interesting for Feyd to come up with that, I thought. The Baron says, now you see how you need me. I'm yet of use, Feyd. And of course, Feyd's thoughts is kind of runs with this metaphor, I suppose, of sword. that the Baron is a sword to be wielded too, a sword to be wielded until it's too blunt for use. Yes, uncle, he says. So here comes the Baron's lesson here, as I've called it. He is, of course, wanting to teach Feyd how to look after House Harkonnen, and I suppose, the response to what Feyd's done. Here it goes, and we have to question: is this misogyny? What's going on here? Why kill all these women? But here we go. And now we will go down to the slave quarters, we two, and I will watch while you, with your own hands, kill all the women in the pleasure wing. So let's kill all the women with his own hands. With his own hands. Again, that we talk about the major motif of hands throughout this book. Agency, threat. The Baron's nearly been killed with a needle that would have went into his palm. With his one real weakness, his slave boys. Kill all the women is what he's ordered here. And now we will go down to the slave quarters, we two, and I will watch while you, with your own hands, kill all the women in the pleasure ring. That's pretty horrific, isn't it? And of course, Feyd's response here is, "Uncle!" Well, in my little notes, I've just written, is this, just to show you, I've gone, is it why? Is this misogyny? And I've also written that this is a hyperbolic response. Massively. The slave master is involved in this. This is where, and I suppose the point from the Baron, if we wonder about this, is that Feyd has attacked the Baron through his sexual pleasure, and now the Baron's going to reciprocate, but much more so. And we'll see that Feyd gets the thoughts on this, but it's absolutely over the top. Slaughter all these women that you have sex with in your pleasure wing. And his response is, there will be other women, Feyd, but I have said that you do not make a mistake casually with me. Feyd's face down. Uncle, you will accept your punishment and learn something from it. And Feyd, we're told, met the gloating stare in his uncle's eyes. And here's his thoughts, and this is the lesson, I suppose. So the Baron's lesson, and I must remember this night, and remembering it, I must remember other nights. Yeah, Carlos says the Baron is a great teacher. Yeah, in fact, there's a mirror about House Atreides and House Harkonnen lessons being taught to their youth, if you like, how they're educated. The Baron is a great teacher, but his lessons are quite horrible. Absolutely. Well, the other thing I was going to point out is that whenever people are by the Baron, he come and let me see, is it sort of bring me their heads? Let me have a look. Bring me their bodies so that I can see it'll be done. It's been done. Bear with me a second. I'm back up to nephew here. Yeah, when it's kill those two that have just gone by. When you finished, add these two who've just passed to your list. I don't like the way they carried that body. One should do such things neatly. I'll wish to see their carcasses too. So it's he's not going down to watch any of the others. This is any of the other murderers are. And doesn't do so, I suppose. This is different. He's going with him to watch. And the question is why, I suppose, again, to make sure that it's done, to watch him, to do it personally, to hit home the lesson. And possibly, I suppose we've got a bit of insight into this, that the Baron doesn't enjoy killing, but to kill all the women, I get the sense from him in this chapter that he is a misogynist in the proper sense of the word, along with all of his other pretty bad traits here. The Baron's a paedophile. He's probably murders his slave boys anyway, so he's a murderer. He doesn't murder too often for pleasure, if you see what I mean. It's not just willy-nilly, but in this chapter, it seems, his whimsy is great, and to kill them for doing that, but it isn't whimsy, is it? I suppose it's all done for effect. There's and I suppose if we think back to the previous chapter, Where we're looking at Paul and particularly Jessica, and we're looking at a lot of ritual, and which is essentially theater drama. If you see what I mean, matched up with some drugs. We've got drugs in this chapter, but we have an awful lot of Feints within Feints. There's a degree of ritual almost within it, or not ritual, sorry, drama and theater about how the two interact with each other, and they both do things for effect, to cause a certain effect. And I think it's quite interesting. And it's a very different kind of interaction between the Baron and Feyd. There is a slight imbalance of power, but they're becoming, as I suppose Feyd points out, how Feyd thinks that because we can bargain, we must be equals or near equals. And I suppose as Feyd gets older, the smarter Feyd gets, the better educated he gets, the more of a threat he would be to the Baron. But then hopefully that would be balanced out by wisdom, and that if the Baron's going to abdicate, then the Baron is a useful tool to keep around, I suppose. A sword to be wielded until it's too blunt to use. Excuse me, too blunt for use. So Feyd's thoughts: we're going to go murder a whole bunch of women, and I must remember this night. And remembering it, I must remember other nights too. And it's also to teach. The other thing I think that this teaches Feyd is that he'll never quite trust one of his slave women again as well. It's to make him fear his bed, if you see what I mean, to reciprocate the fear of having sexual pleasure under the threat of assassination. And the Baron says, "You will not refuse." Feyd-Rautha's thoughts here go to, well, I wonder what you would do if I did refuse, old man, this kind of thing. He knew that there'd be some other punishment, most likely, and perhaps a more subtle one and a more brutal lever to bend him. Or, of course, he would just have him killed, I think. The Baron says, "I know you, Feyd. You will not refuse." Feyd's thoughts are, all right, I need you now. I see that. The bargain's made. But I'll not always need you. And someday. There we go. And that's the way that chapter ends. And it's a good way. And I think Frank totally redeems himself for that wee funny bit of writing earlier. Well, maybe it was just me that thought it was funny, but it's still dangerous. But I think it's a great way. And again, there's that a very tense chapter between these two. And how I've ended it is rest in peace, all the women in the pleasure wing. And there we go. I don't know how many of them. I just assumed there'd be quite a lot. So anybody who kicks the bucket in the book gets a skull. So there we go. Yeah, evil with evil junior, if you like. As I said, it's a chapter. We get the both of these men's sexual tastes, etc. But it's certainly a chapter that's not going to be probably filmed by Denis Villeneuve, because they don't go near the sexual nature of the Baron's character. But yeah, it's one of those chapters where I don't have enormous amount of work to do. It's so dialogue. Dialogue and the thought processes, if you like. It's enormous for that. When I'm sort of making my notes, I'm almost scribbling out every other thing. There's a few good things I do like about it. I like the sword metaphor within the book. I think the Thufir Hawat, once upon a time, symbolized danger to the house. Now it had a new meaning. Still dangerous. It's just because he's still alive. I just thought that was a wee bit funny. In terms of writing, it could have been handled a wee bit better. And that's when I sort of poke Dune apart these days, that I just I'm not looking to analyze it from any particular theme or anything like that. I'm looking at the writing more than anything, and I do enjoy Frank's writing, I have to say. And that last little bit, it's not quite it's not a cliffhanger. It's just setting that up, and it's subtle. One day, someday, this kind of thing. And of course, we're going to stay with House Harkonnen. Because we're going and a lot of talking about Hawat here in the background, and of course we're going to see him in the next chapter. So it's one of those chapters where it's for me, it takes a long time to scribble out the notes. Pardon me, just because I really want to get the dialogue all down correctly. But we're told a fair bit, and it reveals much, I suppose, of the flaws within the Baron's thinking and the machinations of where House Harkonnen are going. They're going for the throne. And I suppose, again, it's a generational thought. Goodness, I was actually thinking about breeding programs and all of this kind of stuff, and countries that do this within the world today. And it occurred to me that my own country is one where there are two communities within Northern Ireland, and one of them, the way that they reckon a united Ireland will happen, and I think it's just kind of happened, is that one will outbreed the other, which is quite an appalling thing to think of. But yeah, it's and I don't know what anybody thinks about just where the Baron picks up there, but it's not a major element of his character, but I do get the sense that the Baron hates women. I mean, something screams, "I don't trust them," etc. There's got to be something more to it than that. But it's with the women again, eh? That bit is where he trembles with the effort of suppressing his anger. Trembles with the effort. It takes real effort there. So I think, and then of course the last bit there, and again it's done very casually, isn't it? And now we will go down to the slave quarters, we two, and I will watch while you, with your own hands, kill all the women in the pleasure ring. And again, it's not particularly Frank doesn't really give us any particular tone, I think, or anything for it there, does he? Let me just see. Which is I scribble my notes down. Yeah, it's just the Baron said. There's nothing. It seems to be like a quite flat, subtle statement, because we'll go hand in hand working together. But first, you're going to you accept your punishment and learn something from it. You're going to murder an awful lot of women. And this is the chap who's killed 100 slave gladiators by his 100th birth, or sorry, is he 17th birthday, wasn't it? Yeah, I think that wasn't it his 17th birthday? Let me see, back up a wee bit. Feyd's 17th birthday, so a couple of years ago. So we can age Feyd at 19 here, roughly, I suppose. Paul's probably about 17. But it's a very interesting little chapter, dialogue heavy, as I said, and really just apart from these two and their bargain, we're getting to see the extended villainy, if you like, of the Harkonnens. Now that they've dealt with the Atreides, it's all the way to the Empire, and all. I suppose the one thing that's just very subtle, we talk about subtlety a few times in this, is the prophet Muad'Dib. And how dismissive, I suppose. Have you heard the latest from Arrakis? No, uncle. There's a new prophet or religious leader of some kind among the Fremen. They call him Muad'Dib. Very funny, really. It means the mouse. I've told Raban to let them have their religion. It'll keep them occupied. That's very interesting, uncle. Yes, isn't it? And I wonder, is that a little bit of we'll shelve that for another time. Isn't it really interesting? But the fact that he's told them let them have their, I don't know. I think the Baron's seriously underestimating what a prophet is, a new prophet or religious leader, especially. And again, what's paradoxical about the Baron here is that from the last chapter we've seen with them and Geidi Prime and the Feyd's 17th birthday, he understands how to create a hero, and he knows what a hero is. And the whole point is about making Feyd-Rautha into a hero to the people of Arrakis, etc., people of Geidi Prime. And so if it's a thing that the Atreides understand as well, that the Harkonnen understand about heroes, is that they come in all shapes and forms. You know, we have hero as warrior, hero as king, hero as prophet. Um, hero as lawgiver, if you like. There are lots of different ways of looking at heroes, but certainly a prophet can be looked at. Some prophets can be looked in that way as well. So yeah, it's a dialogue heavy chapter. We get a little bit of a mention of this prophet. We're told that it's Muad'Dib. I wonder how things are going on Arrakis. Yeah. Uh, and yeah, it kind of, is this what these two have been up to for the last 2 years? I suppose is kind of interesting as well. But we're going to get to see in the next chapter some more interactions with Hawat. And I'm not going any further with this, but I just like the first. I've sat across from many rulers of great houses, but never seen a more gross and dangerous pig than this one. Thufir Hawat told himself. That's the first line of our next chapter. So there we go. But yeah, the Baron's not a nice person at all. The Harkonnens, the culture that they live in, I mean, it's pretty horrific. We've had one, 2, 3, 4, a whole bunch of casual murders here. And I suppose you don't see any of them once again. Well, you meet the two guards off, but slave boy, two guards, slave master for not being, and then a whole bunch of women, slave women in the pleasure wing, all murdered off these, there we go, by these noble houses, these noble lords and ladies and barons, etc., etc. Always little people dying in the background. Nobody really paying attention. But there we go. We've just hit 11 o'clock, folks. I think it's a bit of a quiet one tonight, but it's a short wee chapter, and our next one is pretty short too. Thank goodness, I would say, because I've got a big book to read this week. Let me see, not too many pages, and then we're on our final run, and I think we have a range of different sizes, if you like, but our final chapter, chapter 48, is enormous. It takes us all the way to the end of the book. And once we've got there, by the way, then we will continue. Once the novel is actually finished, we'll continue and try and do an episode. We'll definitely do Appendix 1, which is a mini story on the ecology of Dune, featuring Pardo Kynes. It's like a prelude, a prologue actually to Dune, and it's kind of funny that it's on its back. I'm quite looking forward to that. And then, of course, let me see, in terms of what we can do with the rest of the book, we'll spend an episode on Appendix 2 as well, which is on the religion of Dune. And we can incorporate, I suppose, the final one is, of course, the terminology, all our words and stuff, but we should have hit most of them, along with the appendix, the almanac on Ashraf. So, yeah, Appendix 3, we'll probably do a chapter. Sorry, I missed that one. We'll do a chapter, an episode on that as well, which is the report on Bene Gesserit motives and purposes. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. So yeah, we're on our way to the end of the book. Our next one will be chapter 39. On our way to the 40th chapter. So there we go, folks. So my throat's a bit. And I'm going to try and save it a wee bit. So I will actually say goodnight. We've been on for a couple of hours now, and it's nice to get off one of these a bit quickly, actually, with some of them taking 5.5 hours, etc. So listen, thank you very much for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll try and be on for Thursday at 9 p.m. GMT for our next episode. And so yeah, I'm going to have a wee finish my beer. I'll start reading The Shock of the Fall when my eyesight will still work. So I'll be saying good night to you all, folks. Look after yourselves no matter where you are. And thank you very much for checking in here at the Science Fiction Station. We'll catch you for the next one, hopefully on Thursday at 9 p.m, all being well. So all the very best to you. Good night and take care no matter where you are. Good night.